I thought I'd try something different today and have a look at the subreddit r/songwriting. I see loads of questions being asked there, but what is the quality of the responses? Is it even worth going there for advice on your music? As we go through, we're going to answer the questions that I find, but we'll also take a look at some of the other responses and critique them. And whilst this YouTube channel is primarily a metal songwriting channel, the vast majority of songwriting techniques can be applied to any genre. So it doesn't particularly matter what your genre of choice is, you will most likely benefit from some of what we discussed today. So let's get into it. I'm going to give a brief summary, but if you want to pause the video and read it, I can't stop you. Absolute beginner, absolutely discouraged. Basically, this person feels like what they write is crap and they end up repeating generic sounding ideas. That is a relatable experience. We all start there. The responses in this thread, however, are a bit mixed. Some people are not being clear and others are going way off the deep end. Remote Trash 6648, for example, is not being clear. They start by talking about some power chords and then in the same breath talk about some basic chords as if they're the same thing. They're not. And saying this has a higher chance of confusing people rather than helping them. However, their advice on changing the tuning is actually awesome because it forces you out of your comfort zone and removes your default patterns, which we'll come back to in a minute. So I'm giving Remote Trash 6 out of 10 because their comment is kind of confusing but also has some awesome advice. The next user went straight into talking about music theory, which I guess is fine. But someone who is an absolute beginner, who is also absolutely discouraged, probably doesn't need a theory lecture to get started. I'm going to give this next person like 7 out of 10 because they're sharing good stuff, but they're overcomplicating what a beginner needs to hear. And here's me. Basically what I'm saying is throw out what you know. If you're always using the same chords and always end up writing similar melodies, start by using different chords and the melodies will change with it. Try a new instrument, try a new key, try a new scale, or as Remote Trash said, try a new tuning. Do anything to mess with your patterns to force you to think in different ways. On to the next one. User External Detail is asking, what made songwriting click for you? External Detail says that the advice to get good at songwriting you need to write lots of music is useless. My experience in songwriting came from writing a lot of music, and the responses to this conversation were a healthy dose of honesty. Like this one from Grand Wazoo that tries to recontextualize External Detail's problems with these statements that they don't like. Once again, feel free to pause the video and read it. I'm going to throw 9 out of 10 for this one because the advice was solid, but it also managed to be said in a way that doesn't inflame the conversation. And the thing is that External Detail acknowledges that this comment was useful. However, this makes me think that this whole post was just External Detail's way of expressing their frustration online. I also shared my thoughts on this. The crux of what I had to say boils down to the middle sentence where I say the conversation you've started is effectively trying to say that doing the work doesn't work for you. So, by extension, you expect to earn your skills as a songwriter without putting in the practice. Seems like flawed logic. I then offer up an exercise that is useful for anyone that doesn't feel creative. Lay on your bed with your eyes closed and think of any melody. It doesn't matter if you wrote this melody or it belongs to someone else. Cycle this melody through your head and create variation after variation until you've turned this initial melody into something original. Anyone should be able to do this, and this should be enough to know that you can create something original. My goal with this comment was to give External Detail a chance of having a small win. Hopefully that small win empowers them to see that their problems can be solved with some practice, which I think is a much better perspective than being disempowered because they are fundamentally incapable. On to the next one. I've finally decided to learn how to produce my own music again. I think this person is just making a statement to the world that though they have been discouraged in the past, they want to start working on music again. This is fantastic. I don't think there's much to say here except that if you're struggling to make this decision yourself, it's a good decision that I don't think you'll regret. I believe that it's worth celebrating other people's wins, and this, to me, is celebrating that random person's decision to follow what drives them. I'm not going to rate my own comment because that would be wanky, but I should get 10 out of 10 for that. On to the next one. Sleepy Proximity asks, how much borrowed material is too much? The first response, I have trouble with. I'm going to read it all because it's a lot to unpack. Think of it from a listener perspective. Does it sound like that other song or make them think of it? If so, then you don't want that. Otherwise, it's absolutely fine. What's legally permissible isn't where your head should be at. I hear things that are embarrassingly similar to another famous song by others. It's legal, but it makes you sound hacky. Now, let's start off with the good. I totally agree with what's legally permissible shouldn't be what you're thinking about. However, if a song reminds you of another song, what's the problem? The implication in this comment is that your song has to be totally unique to all other music to be acceptable. No way. You cannot see the connections that other people might see, so trying to write music that doesn't create a connection in another person's brain is ridiculous. Also, throwing around words like embarrassing and hacky aren't helpful. That's just a projection of their judgment onto your creativity. So Viewmaster, I give you like a 3 out of 10 on that response. You're kind of coming from the right place, but you're also throwing in a lot of judgment. OK Librarian, on the other hand, threw out an idea because it sounded familiar. Like, why? Hip-hop is a genre that's built on taking all different manner of musical ideas from other genres and recontextualizing it. That doesn't make the music invalid, it just means that they've borrowed ideas and put them in a new context. I do like that OK Librarian goes on to explain a way to take an existing idea and make it unique, so 6 out of 10. And when I open my fat mouth, I say there's loads of examples of people copying styles and having successful careers. Think about how many AC/DC or Led Zeppelin imitations are out there. So really, the line should be wherever you care to draw it. I Am Contempt says, can't write anything anymore. So here's another person that's down on themselves because they hate what they write. This is super common. The key is to enjoy the process, find the micro wins and explore creativity itself rather than write the next masterpiece. In time, masterpieces will come. And user BrainCell7 gets 10 out of 10 for this. I expand on what they say to include, don't shame yourself for your inexperience. Let the shit songs be the thing that gives you the experience to write the bangers in the future. User Impress Low says that they've got their album written with some chords prepared. We're going to start with my comment on this one because I think it's important to try and understand a person first. From what they said, it sounds like they've got some song ideas prepared, but need help finishing the writing process and then need even more help to turn it into releasable music. So I basically say, to me, the song would be considered written when at least the lyrics, melodies, and chords are written. Then I try to set expectations. If Impress Low thinks that other people are going to spend the time and effort to turn their ideas into amazing music, they're in for a harsh reality. It may cost them a lot of money, and they may still end up unhappy with the results. My suggestion is for them to turn their ideas into demos. Most likely, this alone will help them see their own songs more objectively. But more importantly, it will help them be able to communicate their ideas to others. It will also help them see the disconnect between where they're at and where they think they're at. But here, Retro King is doing something that I think is a bit uncool, but not totally bad. For starts, saying barely 10% is disempowering. Sure, it could be accurate, but what if this is trap music and all it needs is a simple backing track that can be bought for like $20 online? Impress Low then lays down the vocals and sends it off for a mix, done. That's not exactly 10%, is it? But even if it is only 10% complete, it's better to hear that there is work to do, but it's both possible and enjoyable. However, no one who thinks that they've finished a project wants to hear that there's still 90% left. But now we move on to the stuff that I don't like. Prove to yourself that the enterprise is even viable. No. Go fuck that statement right off. If this is a fun project that is being made for personal enjoyment, the enterprise is viable. Retro King is throwing a lot of loaded statements into their response, and that isn't acceptable in my opinion. But in saying that, I do like the idea of focusing on getting 1 or 2 songs release ready first. I would give only 1 out of 10 for the dickish response, but I'll give 1 point for the advice to focus on just 1 or 2 songs. Here, Bonded by Blood has some song ideas that are really deep down the metal rabbit hole. And this is where we come across some bad comments. Joshy Low says, what is this stupid shit with people describing songs? Is it trolling or bots? Oh, that sounds cool, bro. Just this second I wrote a song called Flailing Corpse about a guy getting killed by hyenas. 800 BPM. It was gnarly. Bonded by Blood responds, hey, I wanted to know if I had good ideas before recording the songs. Joshy Low then says, just record them and ask. You don't really have a song until it's recorded. Sorry, just been seeing a lot of these. Right now sounds like you have ideas, not songs. Put the work in, it's always good for learning. You'll have some bad ones. That's how it works. Great. Joshy Low gets 1 out of 10 for this statement for generally providing negative energy and not supporting someone who just wants to be validated. But this statement here gets like 3 out of 10. It has a real dickish tone to me, however, it's not wrong. I said, let whatever you need to say be said. If your way of expressing yourself needs to be done via the medium of rotten brains, don't let anyone tell you different. For now, trust yourself. In the future, let your experience guide you. Here, Bubbly Damage is trying to understand the quote from Ashley Ingram that a song is a conversation with a melody. I think this statement is supposed to be thought of as open to interpretation, and Bubbly Damage is doing a great job of overanalyzing it. Here's my response. The answer I gave was a bit vague because it's not supposed to be specific. The meat of what I said is bad lyrics and melodies don't invite the listener in. Good ones do. Take that to mean whatever you want it to mean, but the point is the listener should feel engaged. And my advice to you is try it. Lyrics are often full of crazy metaphors and imagery. Why not treat your whole song like a metaphor and let the metaphor itself guide your creative decisions? So after all that, I give r/songwriting a 5 out of 10. There is plenty of good advice on there, but that's balanced out with a whole bunch of judgment and loaded statements, people projecting ideas, and people using it as a platform to express their emotions. So if you go here for advice, find what works for you and ignore the rest. Also, don't buy into the trolls. If you're struggling to write your first song, check this video here. If you'd like to learn more about how to use the minor scale creatively, check this video here. See ya.